Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Diary of a Lawyer. And I want to briefly speak about the tragedy of the hundreds of lives that were lost and some missing in the Mediterranean in the last few days. Now, just in context, uh, the United Nations Humanitarian Agency for Refugees and the Organization for Migration have issued a statement describing the events and the respective duties under international law. So I'll look at that statement first to give the context and the facts as they're known at the moment, and then look at what actually the law says. So the statement was released by the UNHCR and IOM in response to the Mediterranean tragedy. And the statement reads as follows. The UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, and the International Organization for Migration are calling for urgent and decisive action to prevent further loss of life at sea following the latest tragedy in the Mediterranean, the worst in several years. And several years is key there because this is not the first one. Now, while the number of people on board in the boat, which capsized on the 14th of June off the coast of Greece, is not clear, it is believed to have been somewhat between 400 and 750, according to various testimonies. Now, so far, 104 people have been rescued and 78 bodies retrieved, while hundreds remain missing and feared dead. The boat was reportedly in distress since the morning of 13th of June, and the large-scale search and rescue operation was announced by the Hellenic Coast Guard on the morning of 14th June after the boat capsized. The duty to rescue people in distress at sea without delay is a fundamental rule of international maritime law. Both shipmasters and states have an obligation to render assistance to those in distress at sea, regardless of their nationality, status, or the circumstances in which they are found, including on unseaworthy vessels and irrespective of the intention of those on board. Any action carried out with regard to search and rescue should be conducted in a manner consistent with the obligation to prevent loss of life at sea. The UNHCR and IOM welcome the investigations that have been ordered in Greece into the circumstances which eventually led to the boat capsizing and the loss of life of so many lives. Both the UNHCR and IOM have been on the ground in Kalamata in southern Greece in close coordination with the authorities, providing support and assistance to the survivors, including non-food items, hygiene kits, interpretation services, and counseling for survivors who are traumatized following the ordeal. The UNHCR and IOM reiterate that search and rescue at sea is a legal and humanitarian imperative. And the statement goes on to say, in strong terms, that the EU must put safety and solidarity at the heart of its action in the Mediterranean. In view of the increased movements of refugees and migrants in the Mediterranean, collective efforts, including greater coordination between all Mediterranean states, solidarity and responsibility sharing, as reflected in the EU's Pact on Migration and Asylum, are essential to save lives. Now, this includes the establishment of an agreed regional disembarkation and redistribution mechanism for people who arrive by sea, which we continue to advocate for, said Gillian Triggs, UNHCR Assistant High Commissioner for Protection. It is clear that the current approach to the Mediterranean is unworkable, Year after year, it continues to be the most dangerous migration route in the world with the highest fatality rate. States need to come together and address the gaps in proactive search and rescue, quick disembarkation, and safe regular pathways. These collective efforts should have the human rights of migrants and saving lives at the center of any response, say Federico Soda. I am director for the Department of Emergencies and of Statement. So, what does the law say in relation to the of rescue of obligation under international law? So I'll just sort of summarize what the law actually says. The law of rescue refers to the legal principles and obligations related to the rescue and assistance of individuals in distress at sea, particularly in international waters. The primary goal of the law of rescue is to save lives and ensure the safety of those in need. While the law of rescue is not a specific international treaty, several legal principles and conventions govern rescue operations at sea. And here are some of the key aspects. Number one, the duty to rescue. Under customary international law, vessels and aircraft are generally obligated to render assistance to any person found in distress at sea, regardless of nationality or status. This study to rescue is considered a fundamental principle of maritime law and is recognized by various international conventions. Number two, international conventions. The International Convention on Maritime Search and Rescue, SAR in brackets, Convention, adopted in 1979, sets out the framework for coordinating and conducting search and rescue operations at sea. It requires contracting states to establish search and rescue regions and to cooperate in providing assistance to vessels and individuals in distress. Number three, the principle of non-refoulement, which prohibits the return of individuals to a place where their lives or freedoms will be at risk. It is an essential principle of international human rights law and applies to rescue operations at sea as well. Now, rescued persons should not be returned to a country where they may face persecution, torture, or other serious human rights violations. Number four, the flag state responsibilities. The flag state of a vessel has primary jurisdiction and responsibility for the welfare of individuals on board, including in rescue situations. The flag state is expected to coordinate and organize rescue efforts involving its vessels and ensure the safety and well-being of rescued individuals. Number five, the coordination and cooperation. International human rights law emphasizes the importance of coordination and cooperation among states, vessels, and rescue coordination centers in responding to distress situations. Now, this includes communication, sharing of information, and effective coordination to ensure prompt and efficient rescue operations. Number six is liability and immunity. The law of rescue generally provides certain protections and immunities to individuals and entities involved in rescue operations. These protections are intended to encourage rescue efforts without fear of legal repercussions, provided they are carried out in good faith and without gross negligence or willful misconduct. However, in sort of summarizing, concluding what the law in a nutshell says, is it's important to note that the specific legal obligations and practices may vary depending on the appropriate laws or applicable laws and regulations of individual countries. Now, additionally, the interpretation and application of the law of rescue can be subject to ongoing developments and international discussions. So, that is, in a nutshell, the parameters of what the law of rescue under international law says. We've had the statement of the International Organization for Migration and the United Nations of the duty to rescue and putting human beings first, and calls for an urgent change. And we have juxtaposed that with what the law says, and it's up to folks to make up their mind whether what happened in Greece is within the obligation of international law. Or, sorry, it was in international waters according to Greece. Obviously, there have been some accounts as to whether or not there were genuine rescue attempts, and if whether the people on board actually denied the support. Now, Al Jazeera and other news organizations have made their own investigation and appear to contradict the accounts of the claims made by various parties in the tragic accident. But we see exactly what their law says, and we hear what the UN says, and actually what the people on board the ship says. Now, the BBC claims that, as reported by the Europe correspondent, says that it has obtained evidence which casts doubt on the Greek Coast Guard's account of last Wednesday's migrant shipwreck, in which hundreds are feared to have died. Now, according to the BBC, it says that analysis of the movement of other ships in the area suggests that the overcrowded fishing vessel was not moving for at least 7 hours before it capsized. It says that the Coast Guard still claimed that during these hours the boat was on course to Italy and not in need of rescue, and that Greek authorities have not yet responded to the BBC's findings. And according to the UN, up to, as I've read, 500 are still missing. However, Greek officials maintain those on board say they did not want help and were not in danger until just before the boat sank. The BBC says that it obtained a computer animation of tracking data provided by Marine Traffic, a maritime analytics platform, and that their data shows hours of activity focused on a small specific area where the migrant boat later sank, casting doubt on the official claim it had no problems with its navigation. Now, the fishing boat had no track, so it's not shown on the map, and neither are Coast Guard and military vessels, which do not have to share their location. It sets out the timeline of the official Coast Guard that challenges the official Coast Guard accounts, which is set out on their website, but concludes that between 1940 and until 2240, Greek officials originally claimed the boat was keeping a steady course and speed, and that according to their accounts, at 23 hours, the boat sank with hundreds on board, and the tracking animation shows a frenzy of ships coming in to help. And that during that time, Greek officials um, insisted that it was not in trouble and was instead safely in its way to Italy, and so the Coast Guard didn't attempt to help. And the scale of according to the BBC, the scale of the animated map suggests it traveled less than a few nautical miles, which may be expected of a stricken vessel buffeted by the wind and the waves in the deepest part of the Mediterranean Sea. And the actions of people in distress, according to the BBC, rocking the vessel would have contributed any movement. And those among the boats that came to rescue was the included Cerebral Beyond, from which footage of the aftermath of the disaster was filmed and later sent to the BBC. A luxury yacht, the Maya Queen, is then instructed to help to take some of the 104 survivors ashore, and those rescued reached the safety at the port of Kalamata, but left behind a series of pressing questions about the whole Greek response, according to the BBC. So we've had the media account and the data. We've had what the United Nations says, and now we've seen what the law says. So it's up to people to make up their own judgment based on some of the summary of the information there, the law, the facts, and the data, and what the UN agencies say. And so there we shall leave it on this episode of the Diary of a Lawyer. Thanks for listening, and we shall speak again. Thank you. Bye.